Hello, people of the internet. Today I will be going over a very short piece of literature by Noël Demeure. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but whatever. Our enemy is the slave. Very blunt there, huh? Most of us foolishly say that our main enemy is the master. I think it would be more exact to say that our enemy is the slave. What this basically means is he's basically saying is that the general public is who we should be most concerned with, because the general public tends to not be very favorable towards leftism, towards anarchism, towards socialism, and so on and so forth. And that it would be easier to it would be more appropriate to deal with them in a way, and how this they go into. A slave myself, I hold it against myself that that's what I am, and try to free myself from this state. But it isn't my master who prevents me from being free. Man against man, the fight would be even. But the mass of slaves among whom I live, the soldiers, the voters, etc. And now, I have a bit of a contention here. The soldiers, I agree, the soldiers, the police, and whatnot, they are slaves of the state. They are just slaves of power, of capital, uh and of higher classes. They are essentially the ones protecting the higher classes, their property rights, and so on and so forth. Voters, though, now this is where I have a bit of a contention, and this is where I think that I'm probably am going to make a few of my comrades a little upset. A little. Hopefully only a little. But I think it's okay to vote. I do. I do think it's okay to vote. I believe that if we look at voting like we are voting for our opponent, not voting for our leader, then that's fine. We can essentially look at our elected officials as our opponent, and who our opponent is matters, because our opponent could be amicable to our desires and wishes, or they could be like Trump and his infamous tweet, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." Because essentially what I'm saying is that we have to consider who our opponent is and what our opponent would be willing to do to satisfy the public. Trump's base likes law and order, whereas um Biden's base would probably prefer uh that the president would make some concessions, and that would be exactly what I'm referring to, is the fact that at least sometimes the liberal party is more amicable to the left than the conservative party. So we should always try to keep the liberals in power and hope that the conservatives become irrelevant, and then once they're irrelevant, we can turn our attention to the liberal establishment and protest, fight against it. Obviously, not violently. I do not advocate for violence, but um, essentially, now that the Liberal Party is in office, we can focus more on our actual praxis. So, like, working with our local leftist organizations like the IWW or the Democratic Socialists of America, so on and so forth. Now, like I'm basically trying to say is like, yes, it's okay to vote. Just don't make voting your whole praxis. And so my enemies are the slaves. But since there are too many of them for them to be defeated through violence, I do what I can to make them my allies. When they will be my friends, there will be no more masters. What they're essentially saying there is that so long as we so long as we so long as we can get people on our side, then eventually, if we get enough people on our side, then the masses will outnumber the bourgeois, which we already do. We already outnumber the state and we outnumber the bourgeois. But if we can get the people who are the general public on our side, all of them, or even just passively sympathetic towards our ideas, then we would be at a massive advantage. We'd have a greater advantage in our numbers. So what we should do then is things like build dual power, meaning like build cooperatives, build mutual aid networks, and so on. And in doing so, we construct a societal paradigm, a new paradigm to challenge the establishment. And if we win, then the establishment falls apart. That's essentially what I believe our praxis is. And that's what anarchist practice should be. Praxis should be to build a society that we can all live together in peace, freedom, equity, and so on. What we need to do is build a new paradigm for people to latch onto, for people to look at and think, yes, this is the future. And that paradigm is one of mutual aid and cooperation. That paradigm is one of equity and liberty. We can make that happen right now, even. We got to keep on working at it. We have to keep on working at creating uh, um, networks that revolve around mutual aid, that revolve around uh, cooperation, that revolve around equality, equity, and being able for us to help each other, to help the world, and that will be um that will be the way forward for humanity. That will be what we need to do.